dramatically changed in terms of work. We've always gone into the office, and since we were considered essential business, we just kept on working. There were some hiccups just in terms of jobs kind of being put on hold, but they've come back to fruition. So in that regard, there wasn't a lot of change for us.
Good afternoon, I can go next. I'm Tess Nugent with Arcadis, and kind of to echo what some of you have already said, there hasn't been that much change. We have worked remotely as far as the office portion of our work. I do field work, so I've always continued to do that through the pandemic as an essential worker. And it's actually been a really busy year or so for us. So I don't know if others have experienced that.
Hi, this is Jed Anderson, Christopher Burke Engineering. So for me, I was out of the office the first 3 months, and I've been back in, but the bulk of our staff are still out. There's many days where I'm the only person on my side of the floor. I think there's been a lot of benefits, I think, in a way, because I know for me personally, the use of Zoom and Teams has turned into a huge time saver and productivity improver for me. Instead of spending hours in the car wasting time, now I can do these types of meetings, and it's significantly helped me be more productive and more efficient. We can collaborate now with 6 or 8 or 10, whatever, 20 people on a call, and they can have their own cursor on a drawing, and we can be pointing things out and take care of things in a matter of minutes that might have taken 3 or 4 hours of driving and sitting. So I think we've become more productive, and learning this technology has been really beneficial for me, and I think our department.
You're still muted, Jim.
Sorry, I double muted myself. Thanks. At Nicor Gas, we are looking to start piloting a reentry starting in June. They're picking a couple floors and then loading them up 25% and then kind of seeing how that works. And then if things move well, maybe they'll spread that out a bit. But I'd say our mantra is basically, it is not going to be like it used to be. It will always be different. We're going to have some element of work from home forever that's built into our new way of life. So I imagine it'll be, as things plan out, it'll be a couple days in the office, the rest of the day at work, at home. And I totally identify with Jed, what you just were saying. I mean, it's amazing that you can just pile things right on top of each other. I don't know if it's so healthy, to have back-to-back calls, but you can certainly get a lot done. And I feel like, my day starts at whatever 8 and it ends at 5, and it's straight up the whole time. So that's my life.
And I can go next. I'm Jeff Mengler with Hay & Associates, and I also agree completely with Jim and Jed on the productivity of Zoom meetings instead of hours in the car driving to get to meetings. Otherwise, like others have said, not a lot of change. I was working from home a couple days a week before the pandemic. Now it's just almost every day. And like Tess, you can still go out and do field work because most of my field work is solo, so there's no risk to that. I don't even have to wear a mask to protect myself when I'm out in the middle of a wetland by myself.
I'll go next. This is Tom Slowinski with V3. Similar comments. We're gearing to go back to the office. I started to go back 1 or 2 days a week, and we're really busy, and Microsoft Teams and screen sharing has been very productive.
I'll go next. This is Kurt Hansen, also with Christopher Burke Engineering. And I would say one thing that has changed a lot over the last year is the Chicago U.S. Army Corps dropping their regional permits and returning to nationwide permits. That has led to quite a change with my job.
Hey, Bill, you're muted as well. Just FYI.
I can go. I'm Zach Taylor. I'm with Stantec. A lot has changed. We're talking about the next normal instead of the new normal now. So we're kind of preparing for what's coming up. I like not having a commute anymore, and that means I get to spend a little bit more time with my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old, who are somewhere in the house behind me. But yeah, for me, I started this new gig at Stantec, moved over from Friends of the Forest Preserves, and I'm now learning about the organization and all the good work that they've been doing here in the Chicago region. So
how about now?
Yes. And welcome, Zach.
All right. This is Bill Riley, and I am with Merrill Lynch. We have stayed remote, and that has been somewhat different for us, although we do most of our work by phone anyway. I would say that the pandemic has definitely maybe brought about some of the future that we always thought about in the office space, and that we are finally going paperless. And while we do not use Zoom, and this meeting is a bit of a challenge, I still don't have this audio quite right, but we are doing WebEx, and that has reduced the travel, obviously, between meetings like everybody else.
Did we get everyone? I feel like there's still a few people missing.
I think,
everybody-
Rich, are you there? Do you want to go? Lauren? Maria?
Hi, everyone. It's Lauren Jennison with RES, formerly Applied Ecological Services. So AES had been working on a remote hybrid schedule before the pandemic hit. So we were fully situated with Teams and now Zoom. So it was a smooth transition for us. And then our field crews were able to work with restrictions. And then the our ecologists working independently, like others have said, without worry for a while now. A lot of us also work in different states. So Zoom has really shown us, along with Teams, what we're capable of, and time saving has been crucial. So ready to get back in person though.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I'm Laura Riley, obviously the coordinator of Chicago Wilderness, and I'm going to echo what Jed said, is that for me, who was always working from home, that this new transition to technology, whereas it may not always work perfectly, is really transformational in how we're able to get together and do our work. And I really value being able to be on a call just an hour before this with folks from Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and hanging up and coming to this meeting here to be with you all. And I think it's something that's going to continue for Chicago Wilderness, and it's going to only help us do our work better. And I welcome your participation. So with that, we want to do a quick recap for those that were not at the Executive Council meeting. Jim Jarazal and I were there, as well as some of you here, but we're just going to do a quick recap of that.
Yeah, so I'll maybe speak to a few points here, and Laura, you can just kind of chime in as well. And I think all of you know that the Executive Council meetings are open to all Chicago Wilderness members. You don't have to be an Executive Council meeting to attend. So I totally and thoroughly encourage you to dive in. If it's 1 hour out of your Zoom time for the day or whatnot, it's easy to do. You don't have to travel downtown. But a couple big ticket items that have been going on with the Alliance is this effort around JEDI, the Justice, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion work. And we have, as you all know, we have made it a priority at Chicago Wilderness to try and, as a coalition, figure out how do we work through this as a coalition? How do we think about how it intersects with what we do? And how can we help do a better job perhaps at that? And so we went through a process where we formed a working group, and this was a diverse group of people, not just the steering committee folks. We went out, we did an RFP, we selected a few vendors. That group winnowed it down. We winnowed it down to 2, and we ultimately ended up with one that we decided to work with. And you can see here that this is the working group of folks that were involved. And bottom line, we have sort of begun that process. So part of it was engaging with the Be the Healing conference. Is that right, Laura? If you're not, yeah, there's a conference last week, a 2-day conference that people were invited to attend. It had a lot of great information about equity and diversity, inclusion, et cetera. And then separately, we've contracted with a different organization, Cream City. Is that right? Cream City?
Yes, Cream City from Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm. And Cream City has laid out sort of a plan for us. It's probably like a 15-month plan, or it's pretty, it's pretty comprehensive, but it will involve gathering some data about us. So a little bit of survey and understanding who we are and what we do, and then working through some facilitation and some long-term road mapping and work with us. So we feel like it's a good strategy, kind of helps us accomplish these things. You could see we've got a budget not to exceed $41,000. And hopefully, we can try and find and leverage other in-kind contributions, other sorts of things not in kind, but other contributions to help offset that cost. But we can afford it as far as our budget goes. So that is up and running. Laura, I don't know if you wanted to add anything more to that.
No, we look forward to hearing more about the assessment process that they're going to begin in July. So stay tuned. There'll be some more information coming out hopefully in July.
That's good. Let's see, what else did we?
Well, I'll say we welcome some new partners, and we're
Yes.
excited to welcome Grace Farm Studios, Chicago Adventure Therapy, Panther Training, which is outdoor training organization, McGinty Brothers, welcome back. They were previous members in the past, Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, and the Wildlife Habitat Council. So we're looking forward to continuing to grow our partnership and always looking for new ways to engage in the outdoors.
Yeah, as far as budget goes, we have, and we have our current budget. We are doing, I think, pretty well with respect to the budget. There was a notable donation again from the Dr. George Rabb estate, and that was an additional $50,000 that was granted, which was so generous and amazing. So that has been brought in this year as well. But we are definitely, I think, just globally really looking at how do we use our resources to do some work, and not just have it as a security blanket, but actually get some work done. And so this work with the JEDI activity, the work with the consultant that we'll talk about here in a second, these are all things that I think we're using these resources to help us advance and move forward on our goals. But overall, the budget seems to be pretty sound. I don't think there's anything notable there, Laura.
Okay.
We, well, Laura and I kind of took the bull by the horns on this one, but the IDNR had reached out to me specifically, but reached out to us and said, hey, look, we are going to be releasing a grant around the urban community forests. And they currently have a grant that they issue every year. And some of our partners in Chicago Wilderness, the Morton Arboretum, which is the CETI, the Chicago Regional Tree Initiative, and then Tree Keepers, which is part of Open Lands, they currently receive grant money from IDNR to implement and work on this particular effort for our urban community forestry. But IDNR was looking to expand their partnership, and we're looking for new innovative partners, and they reached out to us. And so what we did is we, and this was a really, really short, this was a short fuse. I mean, we had a couple weeks to kind of digest, try and socialize it with the steering committee and put together the grant request and submit it back to them, which we did. And what we basically decided is that what we could bring to the table as Chicago Wilderness is the ability to convene and gather people together, like we do with our
Cafe series.
yes, sorry, thank you, the cafe series, and which we know how to do. We can do that well. And we also leveraged in the concepts of the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, the JEDI effort. And so what Laura and I put together was a proposal for $75,000 to cover a 2-year period of time. It would be a matching grant where we could match that with in-kind activities. And that grant would basically have us do quarterly cafes or Zoom, cafe meetings where we would address the topic of urban forestry. The goal that they're trying to do is really just develop more, tree planting ordinances, people that are certified, are arborists in communities, different kinds of structure that allow communities to add and develop tree canopy. And he's got some KPIs that he tracks, or some key performance indicators that he's tracking. And the goal is that we would try and, advance those indicators. And if he gets more, he counts by population. So if a town adopts an ordinance, that's, 20,000 people, he puts that into his pot. And when he goes back to the feds every year, if he increases his number, he gets more money. And if he gets more money, then he can do more. And that's what happened last time that allowed him to reach out and ask for us to help him. So we went through a process with the steering committee. We quickly kind of ratified this, got it submitted. It's currently in the hands of IDNR. And I believe he submits that grant requests like any day now. And so we would find out if that actually comes back. And if it does, it's doing a couple things. One, it's providing funding that would basically underwrite our cafe needs, right? So Zoom, the seats, the license, that covers all those sort of costs. It would also include covering the lion's share of that JEDI work that we talked about just a second ago, that $41,000. It'll cover substantially that effort. And then it would also provide some additional funding just to do the nuts and bolts, the things that Laura would be doing and that kind of thing, keeping track of the accounting and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a super big win-win for us as an organization to help bring some additional revenues in, a win-win for us to advance trees, which fits in nicely with our goal 3 and the sub goal of tree canopy. It also allows us to partner with the existing entities that are already significantly engaged in this, which would be CRTI and Tree Keepers. And it dovetails in nicely because it's not overlapping, but it's complementary. So it's not competing, it's adding to. And I would just end by saying IDNR was really, really, really interested in engaging with Chicago Wilderness. Like they just wanted us to do this thing. So even when we kind of were bumbling through this thing, they were great partners to help us get there. And I have hats off to Laura. It was sort of a two-man job, a man and woman job here to get this thing over the finish line. And it was it was a little bit helter skelter, and we probably broke a few eggs in the process, but I think we got it done. So that was pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, we're very excited. And I think that look forward to hearing hopefully positive news soon. Thank you, Jim, for your leadership on this one.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really cool. When do we expect to hear? Any idea?
I think he was submitting it like, I want to
May
say
15th was May 15th was HIP's submission date. And so we're hoping to hear back relatively quickly. So I think fingers crossed. Think good thoughts.
Yeah, and Jack, I think this fits, we were trying to make it include stuff with the mapping, and it got a little bit unwieldy. So we originally had some interns in there and everything. We kind of pruned it back a little bit because it was we probably got over our skis a little bit too much. Yeah. But I honestly, I do feel like there's a partner here with IDNR that could be long-term, and that I think there's more to be had here. So I think this is a great step forward. It's a good learning experience for us as an organization, as an alliance, to try and figure this out, and then kind of build a little more discipline around how we go about doing this, and how we count in kind, and do we have some systems to capture that? Like if we were working on it right now, do we have this 12 people times 1 hour? Do we capture that, and can we put that? We could build some of that acumen, I think, and that muscle over time.
Yeah, it'll make the process easier, hopefully, going forward too. So thank you guys for forging the way.
Yeah, there were a little bit of a bloody nose and a scrape here and there, but we made it through.
You guys look no worse for the wear.
Right. And then ICL, Institute for Conservation Leadership. Maybe some of you know who they are or not, but they're a nonprofit. They do a lot of work in the in this space, and sort of this space of what we do as Chicago Wilderness. We have hired them to help lead us and guide us as strategic consultants, to help us kind of put all these pieces together, understand what this might look like. We've got a couple products that have already come out of this, but what you see on the screen right now is sort of a flow chart, if you will, of a bit of how we are designed, but then also you could see our goals down at the bottom, the 7 goals. And part of what ICL will help us just make sure this is all connecting, this is all working together, this is all, meeting what we need to do. I don't know, Laura, if you've got more you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I just think that this is kind of gives us a visual of the work that we're sort of taking on, particularly with goal 3, green infrastructure in the built spaces, but how it relates and connects to the existing team structure and our governance structure. And so I think the exercise of putting this together was helpful for us to prepare for our work with ICL. And I think it will kind of make it easier moving forward.
And I think that are we still in the review of the executive council, or is this...
No,
okay.
I think that's kind of a wrap.
Yeah, so maybe we'll just stop and pause there for a second, and at least Sarah, if you wanted to kick off the next section. But basically, that's the majority of what we talked about. I'll say the executive council meeting, ICL basically led us through, and I don't know if some of you were on that or not. I don't know if maybe Tom or Jeff, maybe you were on, but it was a really good exchange and a facilitated thing. Jack, you were probably there. And we went to breakout groups and then came back and we did some polling, and there was a lot of really dynamic, engaged conversation that was just super powerful for me, just going through that. I just felt like super energized by that effort. And they were consolidating and kind of putting things together even on the fly as we were talking. So I feel like we've got a really good partner to help us think through what, how we move forward as an alliance. I was really impressed.
Great, thanks. Any questions regarding, I guess, the executive council or what Jim covered? Right, then I'll go into kind of the goal 3, which I think have gone over, and I think we'll probably continue to go over at these meetings. And this is kind of the goal that Chicago Wilderness Corporate Council has kind of been tasked to kind of lead. And ultimately there's, 5 different priority areas. There's a different lead for each priority area. And, we're still, I think, I don't know how many months I'm going to continue to say this, but we're still kind of at the, preliminary stages of flushing some of this out and trying to figure out kind of each piece and how it fits into the bigger picture. But ultimately the goal is that we will, add, acreage on the ground and how to track that. And specifically, so for each priority area, there's a lead. And, I can talk a little bit about the rights of way, which is we do have, I think, a pretty solid team or some people that have expressed interest. We're working very closely with the Rights of Way as Habitat Working Group, which is out of the UIC Energy Center. If anybody is interested in joining, all of the priority areas or any of them, please let us know. We are keeping kind of a master sheet. But ultimately, the Rights of Way as Habitat Working Group has a grant from the Donnelly Foundation. And so instead of kind of making up our own kind of path, we're really piggybacking and partnering with them because they are asking some really tough questions. And so I think a lot of the outcomes and a lot of the findings that they're going to have from this Donnelly exercise will also support our goal and how to move forward with the goal. And so we've had initial meetings, both with the Rights of Way as well as some groups, and they're just trying to find the initial stage is trying to find out what are the largest challenges that all of these groups have to be able to move forward with adding pollinator habitats to the Rights of Way. So we'll find out, I think, a lot of what these challenges are, which I think many of us know, and then hopefully provide some solutions. So we may actually have funding, or at least, come up with some kind of template and how to really track all of these acres that are being put in the ground. And I don't know if Jim or others leads have updates for their priority areas, but I know each priority area is, is moving forward.
I would just, I guess, just from my perspective, I was kind of taking the lead on that 5th one, which was the tree canopy one. And I guess I would just say that I haven't had enough time to really kind of get the thinking group together, but I think this effort with IDNR and getting that funding associated with that, building out the tree canopy work that we were looking to get contracted with IDNR really fits nicely into that bucket. So maybe we've made progress that we didn't know we were making. So anyways, we'll see how it goes.
I think definitely. I think as I was planning this out, I think like this is all going to tie together. And as we do the cafes, I think the goal, and Jack can probably help speak to this, is that we are going to be continuing to communicate with the mapping group to make sure that we're identifying the right group and the right metrics to use to incorporate into all of our goal work. And I think probably the next step, and we did have a meeting a few months ago with some of the key partners, and I think that's when Mike Brunk from IDNR did get engaged. I think our goal is to continue to hold more regular meetings, and we would like to invite all of you here to participate in these along the 4 sub goals. We don't know yet, and maybe that's a question for you. Should we continue at this level to meet separately with each of the subcommittees, the tree canopy, the Rights of Way working group, the conservation at corporate university area, or should we kind of have some higher level inclusive meetings to make sure we're on the same page? And maybe it's a hybrid of both. But we just want to make sure that we sort of get some of those subcommittees going at this point. And I think some of the work that we did was really valuable leading into this. And then through our work with ICL, I think it will just kind of continue to be formulating the next step to be able to identify the acreage and make sure that we're communicating with everyone and integrating the work.
Yeah, I can comment quickly, Laura, just that the mapping group continues to make really cool progress on the hub, and the work that's being done within this goal, actually across all the goals, and then within this one and the subcommittees is I think going to feed nicely into that. And the hub itself, as it gets developed, is going to be a powerful analytical as well as a communication tool for all of the goals. One of the things we're seeing is that different goals are further along, kind of like, like you guys just acknowledged, and that's okay. And I would, as I'm hearing you, talk about this, I'm thinking too that I think it's okay even that certain subcommittees are further along than others too. And I would say as soon as, we get, the subcommittees get, available information about metrics and associated data layers and things like that, as they can start, the sooner they can start feeding that into the hub, the better. And there'll be more information forthcoming on that. Mark Johnston, who's, been on our calls in the past and presented progress, is doing a great job along with, Mark Bowman, and Field Museum is actually actively hiring an intern right now too, to support the project. So we're expecting to make some, significant progress here this summer. So I think the work that we're doing on these subcommittees will, like I said, it'll feed well into that. I'm sorry,
I had one
Jeff.
question I just thought of. I don't know where this fits in, because I have gotten some notes from Jim Anderson about trying to restart our regional invasive species group that I was once involved in the leadership of, used to go by the name of NIP. And I just wondered where that fit into our subgroups. It seems like there's definitely a role for corporate council members in that effort. And it was highly successful. We just we ran out of money, we lost our staff, and we lost our fiscal agent, and weren't able to recover from those three things. But there seems to be a significant effort to get that started again, to use all the things that worked before and kind of pick up where we left off. And it really allows for great coordination across boundaries on invasive species control. So just curious where that fits in. And it seemed like there'd be a role for our folks in that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's maybe can you roll back to the list of the goals and maybe the subcommittees too?
Yeah, it's probably a Laura question.
We can talk about,
so can you
how that might fit in.
can you tell me, I missed the beginning of that, is it the Invasive Species Council that you're talking about? Because there is talk about re-engaging that, and
yes,
right now that's falling under the Healthy Landscapes goal number 1. And
okay.
I know that Jim Anderson and others are looking for some strong leadership in this area, maybe Allison Frederick and some folks that have been working on this. And so I would be happy to keep you informed of any of the meetings that get scheduled for that.
Yeah, I'm sure Jim will keep me informed, knowing I was in the leadership of the previous effort. But I just, wanted to make sure that was something that folks in this council knew about.
Yes, and you know what, I wanted to say this while we have this chart up again. I think what we tried to do is just sort of, even though we've developed these 7 goals, the existing committees and teamwork that was being done fits under all of these areas. If it's not represented here specifically, it should be falling under these buckets. It isn't like there's been a change in the priorities. This is just sort of a visualization of it and kind of helping us sort of think about how that work will continue to happen.
I'm sorry, did you say that you're considering putting the invasive species in the number 1 Healthy Landscapes? Is that what the thought is?
Correct. Yeah. For right now, that's where it resides. Now, there's obviously a lot of crossover between all of these goals. They don't stay in one bucket. Climate and all of them, aquatic resources, they really do. We try to do this just as a visualization with the acknowledgement that there isn't like a single bucket. And as the team in the meetings continue to evolve, it's just we'll be asking for people to participate in every area that they are interested in. If you're in the corporate council area and you have work that fits into goal number 3 that we've identified, great. If you have an interest in both, and you want to migrate to landscapes and also be involved with nature aspects and benefits to people, we just are looking to just sort of kind of keep the work going and keep the communication across these goals really, really more integrated.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question for Jim and or Laura. So for the priority areas within this goal,
Oh, yeah.
who are the, I guess, the associated leads for the 5 areas? Do you
Okay.
have all those? I mean, that would be useful for me to know and take back to the, to the
Yes.
mapping team.
So, so we have at least one goal identified, and I'll reshare at the end the spreadsheet that we created that had some brainstorm people and then people that were invited to attend the last meeting. But the tentative goal for number 1, corporate industrial schools, university campuses, is Jim Kleinwachter from the Conservation Fund, and he's been working with the Conservation at Work and the Conservation at Home program for a long time. And Rights of Ways, Sarah Race has stepped forward, and she's working to integrate the work that's being done at UIC with Iris Caldwell, and it includes Mark Johnston. He's been involved with that group for a while, and others. Sarah, if you want to speak to that a little bit further, please do.
I think you covered, and there's many other on the list from all different companies and transportation entities. So it's covering rights of way. So it may be railroads, utilities, and road right of ways.
Yeah, correct. I will reshare. I'll put the attachment in the
That'd be
minutes
fine.
to this. And then the municipalities and residential, Maggie Solis is championing this, but we want to make sure that we include organizations like Wild Ones, Westcote Wild Ones in general, the work that was done for the Chicago Area Living Corridors, and Edith Macra, and some of the other work that's being done regionally, and kind of identifying what those benchmarks are. And then, so we were somewhat tasked with reviewing and expanding the GIV, and I know that this is sort of a placeholder here. I think we're just going to move that out, and hopefully there will be a committee that evolves to tackle this. I don't know that we've had anyone stepping forward to spearhead this, and I think it may be something that's more universal to all of the goals as we look at this as a need. And I don't think it's solely resting on our shoulders. And then finally, tree canopies, Jim Jerzal, and through the work with CRTI and open lands, tree keepers, Jim is shepherding that. So
Good, thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah, just want to reiterate too, I think part of the power of the hub is that it's it's a living tool, an evolving tool. So, again, as things, it's fine to start feeding it, if some of these priority areas are further along than others, that's okay. I think the more information we start getting into it, the better. But that doesn't mean that we can't continue to add to it over time.
Yeah, that's good to hear, actually.
Yeah, Jack, and that's a great point. And like when we were talking with the folks from IDNR, Mike Brunk, he has a spreadsheet of all his KPIs and the towns that he's talking with, and this, that, and the other thing. It's totally ripe for mapping. I mean, putting it into a geospatial kind of environment like a map, and that was one of his big wins. They had how he got more money because he just literally Google mapped stuff and was finding things next to each other and was sort of, so if we can just map what he's got, there's probably just stuff laying on the ground to pick up here and help him. So I think that's a great point.
Okay, good.
Laura,
Thanks.
I'm not getting any information. I think I signed up for the priority. I'm sorry, I don't have that one with the corporate campus and educational campuses and things like that. Was it supposed to be?
No, I think unfortunately, well, I think this is where we're at now, is we have not had specific subcommittee goal meetings. And I think now is probably the time where we need to convene those. And as Jim was saying, I think just was a matter of capacity as we were moving forward with a couple other moving parts. But I think this is a great time, and I'll reach out to Jim. And maybe what I'll do is, I think next step is pull together the group of subcommittee chairs, and maybe we can map out a calendar, and I will get that out to everybody and invite folks who are both signed up on the sheet already, and then just do a call for participation to be involved with the next step of meetings.
Okay, I have a question then. You've got the priority, I think there were 4 priorities, and then you had that other illustration of what, 7 or 8 different other committees? Yeah, that.
Yes.
How do these two, can you help me with that? How do they tie together? I guess I'm kind of confused. Are these going to be separate committees, this 1 through 7, and then priorities, another set of committees? Or I don't understand real well.
I mean, want me to help out?
Sure.
So what you see on this chart here is at the bottom, 1 through 7.
Yeah.
These are the overall Chicago Wilderness goals that we have pulled out. And each one of those goals has a series of partners and engagement that maybe already exists, or partners are already doing work in these spaces, or there's activities that we know we need to do. And so each of those 7 goals has a steering committee, a Chicago Wilderness steering committee member assigned. So for instance, myself and actually Maggie, we're both on the steering committee. We're assigned goal number 3, which is the green infrastructure built space goal that you see there.
Okay.
Each goal group then is going to implement that and kind of build it out and expand on it. And so like the slide, I don't know if the slide before or after this one here. So this is ours. So this is goal number 3. This is you could see the goal in the green box. That's kind of that's what you would see at the big ticket level. Like all goals have that green box, basically what that goal is. And then we've taken the green box, the big goal, and we've now digested it down into a little bit more specificity. So we've taken goal 3, the kind of what's written there in the green box, and we've broken it down, and we want to kind of focus on these 5 areas or 4, like the number 4 might pop off, but those priority areas. And within each of those priority areas, we then, as the kind of host, Chicago Wilderness Corporate Council being kind of the host of goal number 3, we now kind of are trying to break it out and build onto that. So Sarah is leading the charge on right-of-way. And that means that we want to gather people about right-of-ways, talk about it, start thinking about how this all plugs into the mapping and that kind of thing. For the corporate industrial campuses, same thing. That's where Klein Walker was going to kind of try and lead that charge and do that. And so that's kind of what we're talking about with Laura here about, it's probably time for us now to kind of, as the leads of each of these little bits, we probably need to start thinking about how do we now have a meeting and start moving forward with some of this stuff, start putting some meat on the bones, if you will. But each goal has sort of this effort that's going on in parallel across the whole Chicago Wilderness.
And
Thank you.
there will be resources that are also, they're compiled and shared out either through the hub or through the Chicago Wilderness website. And those will be kind of cross-referenced back and forth as we do that. So within the Healthy Lands, those are some of the committees and teams that we're meeting to also do their work, but that are also being re-engaged at this time. So if it feels like you haven't heard anything either from Healthy Lands or from this, it means there hasn't been at this moment yet something happening, but we will be moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
And then I would just add on top of all that, that's where the consultant LCI is
ICL.
ICL. We'll never get that right. So
Lots of
ICL,
acronyms,
I know.
always.
But then they're going to help us sort of as we do this whole thing and pull this all together, just making sure it's all sort of fitting together right and helping us visualize that and see that and, get it all done well.
Great. So if there's, and we can talk about this further too at the end, and if there's more questions, and I'm happy to follow up specifically with anybody. With that, I want to introduce Bill Riley from Merrill Lynch. He's going to give a values-based investing presentation. Full disclosure, Bill Riley is my husband. He is working in a room nearby remotely, as we all have been but you're on mute.
Are you taking all the bandwidth away from him, Laura?
Probably. I might have to turn my camera off.
Pound on the wall. Hey.
Still
How
not
about
hearing.
now?
There you go. Gotcha.
All right, I double muted myself. So thank you very much. I am going to go ahead and take over the screen. Is that correct, Laura?
Sure. I'm going to stop sharing and then you can start sharing. Hold on.
What is that a picture of, Bill? That landscape that you just had as the cover sheet?
I'm gonna have to wait for it to come back up again. Are we
Okay, you
okay for me
can
to
share now. You can share now.
It's not allowing me to take it.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and
Actually, how about? Are you seeing it now?
nope.
Yeah, if you're not used to Zoom, it's a little tricky trying to figure out how to display your screen, I have to say. Oop, no,
That's
Laura's
me.
doing it.
I just
Okay.
started sharing it. So I'll go ahead and do that for you, Bill. You can just tell me when to advance.
All right. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we do. I am Bill Riley. I lead a wealth management team at Merrill Lynch, and our expertise is in the area of sustainable investing, or what we call values-based investing. And just to give a little background, I'm really glad to be able to be doing this at Merrill Lynch. We are part of Bank of America, which was named the best corporate bank for corporate social responsibility 3 out of the last 5 years. We're one of Forbes companies to change the world. We have been carbon neutral since 2019, and earlier this year pledged to be zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Bank of America underwrote the first green bonds, and at Merrill Lynch, we have the most robust ESG, or sustainable investing platform available amongst the US investment firms. What I thought we could talk about today is how we at my team work with individuals and small businesses about aligning their investments with their values. And I think that one thing that I would imagine everybody on this call would agree with is that we want to be good stewards with our money. We probably, as a group, all are cautious where we do our shopping. We want to support businesses that support our values. And the same can be true with your savings and your investments. And so we'll talk a little bit about why this is a fast-growing area in the marketplace, why companies need to care about ESG, environmental, social, and governance matters, and why individuals should also be paying attention to it with the decisions they make. We believe everybody's money is important. Doesn't matter if we're talking about a corporation with a very large pension account or an individual is just getting started in their IRA. I think that what we talk about today can be of benefit to everybody. I would just say that I've been doing sustainable investing for about 25 years, but it's really been the last 4 or 5 years since the 2016 presidential election when I decided that I really needed to be out doing workshops on this and educating people about it, because I don't think that we can expect that the government is going to make all the changes that we need in society, whether that be relative to climate change or how we treat people who are different than ourselves. When it comes to these items, and certainly Chicago Wilderness has done a great job on the JEDI front, shows again how an organization does not have to wait for the rules to change. They can be a leader themselves. You want to go ahead and hit the next slide? So the first thing I want to do is just talk about some of the terminology. In Wall Street, we're famous for having a different name or many names for the same thing, and using acronyms rather than words, and talking over people's heads. So just in general, what I would say is there's a bunch of different names for what we're talking about. It used to be called socially responsible investing, and that had mostly to do with getting rid of certain types of investments from a portfolio. Maybe somebody did not want to be involved with companies that were in South America during apartheid. Maybe somebody doesn't want to own tobacco related companies or alcohol companies. And so they could screen those out, and the early investments in those areas were just that. We're taking what were sometimes referred to as sin stocks out of portfolios. More recently, there's more talk about green investing, sustainable investing, or ESG investing. Again, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance, and identifying companies that are making good decisions in those areas. So environmental would, for example, be companies that have a small carbon footprint, use fewer resources. Social decisions would be companies that treat their customers well, and they have good practices for their employees. Their products are safe. And governance talks about decisions made at the top of a company, where whether a company has diversity on their board of directors, whether their pay packages are appropriate and fair. And what this type of investing is identifying companies that are doing well in those areas, and rather than simply avoiding bad ones, rather emphasizing and searching out and finding companies that are making good decisions. Thematic is sometimes talked about. That would be someone who maybe is interested in investing in wind energy, or is interested in gender equality. There are investment practices and strategies for that. And lastly, impact first tends to be more of a philanthropical approach, where you're looking first to have a social impact. Say, for example, you loan money to an agency that's building homes for low-income people. The most important thing is that they actually provide that housing. Secondarily would be any return you might get in the form of interest on that loan. This is really an exciting time to be in this business and looking at things. We feel at Merrill Lynch that we are on the forefront of tremendous change, and it's exciting. There's a lot of things going on that really play right into these ESG themes that we're talking about. And Laura, if you'd go to the next slide. One more, click. This is kind of looking at the focus of the 2010 decade versus the 2020s. So on the left is what was the focus in the past, and on the right is the focus for the future. And I just point out a couple of these. We think as we move into this next decade that we've reached peak globalization. Money, people, and goods are not going to be able to travel around the world as easily as they could before. We think we're going to reach peak oil, where demand and production of fossil fuels is likely going to hit its maximum and start declining. We think we're going to have peak cars. We think that we'll reach the biggest number of sales for internal combustion engines that we've seen, but then that's going to plateau and start to head down as well. And in addition, peak stuff. It's not going to be about consumption going forward. We think we're entering into a period where the shared economy is going to be more important. And you can think of things like Uber as an example of that, or the Divvy bikes as an example of that. Just looking at the top first on this, just a couple of those, we're talking about less about humans, more about robots, less about men, more about women, talking less about the rich and more about the poor as inequality, income inequality becomes a bigger and bigger issue in America and really around the world. At the bottom, shifting from profit maximization to moral capitalism, shareholders to stakeholders, smart cities, potentially further migration from fossil fuels towards clean energy. And these are some of the areas that play right into ESG as we think about it. Next slide, please. This graph just shows the growth of money invested into ESG funds globally. So you can see in the last 4 years, the amount of money, which is the black line, has really skyrocketed. On the blue line is the number of funds, so the number of options to invest in this way has increased dramatically as well. But in the last year, in 2020, over $200 billion were invested into ESG investments. Next slide. The left chart talks again about total assets invested into ESG funds. We're about 1.3 trillion globally. Importantly, that while the European countries were leaders in this, US is catching up quickly. The growth of funds invested in ESG investments were up 94% last year. It's a double from where they were the year before that, and a triple from where they were the year before that. And this is just what's invested in ESG mutual funds and exchange traded funds. US SIF, which is the Sustainability Investment Forum, has identified over $32 trillion globally invested with a sustainable mandate. And that's 1 out of every $3 invested in the global capital markets has a sustainable mandate. And why does that matter? If there's this much money going into the markets and looking for companies that are making good decisions in the areas of ESG, then those share prices of those companies are likely to go up. Next slide. Actually, I have to click it
Bill,
twice.
can I ask you a question, Bill?
Sure.
About the slide?
Sure.
There's a big step change that looks like it happened in that, I don't know, sometime in 17. Do you know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
A fact of just data collection, or is that something happened?
Well, there's a couple of things that happened globally at that point around retirement and pension funds, and whether or not they had to have social mandates as part of their investment mandates, and that's a big part of it. But I think what probably is also happening is we're catching more of, particularly in the U.S., of retirement dollars included in that graph. So it's a little bit of both. This was actually a policy that was put in place under the Obama administration in America. It was reversed during the Trump administration, but it had a delayed deadline for doing it. And so it's still much of what was in retirement plans and pension funds was required to make that additional consideration in their investments. So typically a fiduciary is only concerned about investment returns, and what those laws said is you need to consider about as well as investment returns, what the social impact of the investment is as well.
Okay, thanks. That's interesting.
Just to maybe pause for just a second on this, make sure I don't want to assume that everybody understands how the investment markets work. But basically, if you own a stock, you are an owner in a company. You're a partial owner in whatever company you own the stock in. If you own a bond, you have lent money to the company or issuer of the bond. As such, if the value of the company goes up, the value of your stock goes up, but it may or may not impact the value of your bond. It's a little bit different. But so if you own stocks, or if you own a mutual fund that owns stocks, then you're an owner of the companies in your portfolio. And what matters as the owner is the value of your company, is that will dictate the value of your stock. As little as 40 years ago in the 70s, I guess that's now 50 years ago, the value of a company was largely easy to determine, in that it was the value of the factories, the value of their trucks, the value of their inventory, things that you could touch, the tangible assets on the balance sheet. And only about 15 or 16% of the company's value was considered intangible. Laura, would you click again? Over time, that into the more current time has completely flip-flopped. The intangible assets of a company now make up the lion's share of a company's value, where the tangible assets, the value of their real estate and equipment, is very small. And a classic example of that might be Google, where they don't own a lot of real estate. They don't own a lot of equipment. What they own is a great brand. They own the largest workforce of PhDs. What they own is internet experience and entertainment experience that is hard to value. But these things that are considered intangible assets, brand reputation, customer satisfaction, employee safety, governance, all is what we're talking about with ESG. Next, we'll just talk a little bit about why this matters. So Laura, if you hit the next slide. If you click at it one more time. There's some reasons we've found why companies should care about having a good ESG score or relative rating. 79% of consumers are citing purchasing preference based on the scores of the companies that they're doing business with. Goes back to being a good steward with your money, as we talked about at the beginning. Majority of consumers have stated that they would be willing to pay a premium in order to get a green product versus a non-green alternative. A company's environmental position may make it easier to enter new markets. Next one, companies find it easier to attract, retain and motivate their employees if they are a good operator. Classic example here is Costco. has one of the lowest employee turnovers of any company in America. That reduces their training costs, their hiring costs, and they have a much more experienced workforce because they treat them well. Companies can reduce their resource costs as much as 60% by paying attention and doing well with their environmental component of ESG. And of course, there is a risk, and it seems more and more likely that corporate profits can be at risk from government intervention if companies don't make some of these decisions themselves. The next slide, please. I think you have to click it one more time again. So we have found that there are more and more companies reporting their data for their social responsibility statistics. 90% of the S&P 500 companies, the largest 500 companies in America, do publish with their earnings data, their social responsibility data. We've found that it's much better for a company to even report bad numbers than to not report at all. Companies that don't report this and don't show transparency in these areas are being punished in the marketplace. Providing visibility on the ESG metrics leads to better stock performance, which can lead to lower cost of capital. Companies have an easier time raising money if their stock price is doing better. So there are a couple of things we've looked at even to highlight this a little more closely. If you click again. We have found that the score of the social considerations for a company, can lead to a 10% premium valuation for companies versus their peers with lower scores. The most important element or factor to look at for companies relative to stock valuation is actually reducing carbon emissions, which can lead to a 16% premium. Lastly, I'd just say you don't have to be a great performer. The market right now is rewarding companies that are improving their ESG score. So, you know, just because a company isn't where it needs to be, if they're making steps in the right direction, the market is rewarding them. Next slide, please. Why does it matter to investors? And quite simply, for the last 20 years, companies that make good long-term decisions in the area of environmental, social, and governance issues outperform on virtually every financial metric that matters. They have higher revenue, higher earnings, their market cap, so their stock goes up more than their peers with lower scores, and they create more jobs. Another click, please. This just starts showing stock performance of companies with good ESG scores. If you look at this graph before I put the data into it, across the bottom is the probability of a loss. So the further to the right that you go, the greater the probability of the loss. On the right, or sorry, on the left axis, the up and down axis is the average annual return. So if you're investing in the market, what you want is higher returns and less risk. And what this shows is what happens if you have a regular investing style and add an ESG approach to the investment, what that does to your returns. So if you go ahead and click, Laura. You can see in every one of these cases, the risk-adjusted return improves by looking at environmental and social and governance factors. There's a couple where the returns stay about the same, but the risk gets dramatically less. And we'll talk about why that is. Next slide, please. It's great to talk about it in theory, but here's the actual numbers. I mentioned that Merrill Lynch has a very robust platform for ESG investing. And this looks at mutual funds, ETFs, exchange traded funds, which is where you find a lot of your indexes, and separately managed accounts, which are more institutional approach to investing. Over the 3-year rolling periods, the ESG alternatives on our platforms outperformed 90% of the time, outperformed non-ESG investments. And over longer periods of times, 5-year rolling periods, they outperformed between 80 and 85% of the time. This is fantastic outperformance. I mean, 50% would be performing about in line. So overall, virtually all these strategies are outperforming non-ESG investment solutions. Next slide. And why is this? One of the main reasons is companies that are making good ESG decisions tend to be our most innovative companies. On the left here is a picture of a Waymo vehicle. This is a autonomous driving vehicle that has been put out by Google. On the right is iRobot Taxi, which is one of the big autonomous taxi services in Japan. And both of these companies are operating autonomous, driverless taxi services. Waymo is operating in the Phoenix area, largely around Chandler, Arizona, right now, where they've been marketing this for a couple years and testing it. They've been some with drivers in there just in case, but they've been doing more recently, not even having a driver in there. In Japan, they had really hoped that the Olympics was going to be the big rollout of and showing off their robo-taxi service. Obviously, with COVID, I think that some of the luster has come off the Olympics, but definitely a technology that has arrived already. It's a question of Americans and not just Americans, people around the world becoming more comfortable with the idea of being in a car without a driver. We actually are thinking and looking towards a ride-sharing revolution, where in America we see, particularly in the more urban areas, cars that are connected to the internet, autonomous driving, powered by electricity, and an increase in the shared ride, more Uber and taxi service, and people owning less cars. In that environment, we're already anticipating a 59% drop in the number of vehicles, 87% reduction in accidents, 54% fewer parking spaces, and an 85% reduction in emissions. Next slide. This is one of my favorite ESG stories. Moller-Maersk is the largest shipping company in the world. They have over 700 container ships circling the oceans and carrying cargo. This is a picture of their Triple E cargo vessel, very large cargo vessel. They commissioned these in 2011, and they have special design. They're a U-shaped hull. You can kind of see midline there. It's flatter sides than a lot of cargo ships. This little design difference made them able to stack these cargo containers that you see on trains and trucks all the time, 23 wide instead of 22. They were able to put an extra 2,500 containers on each ship. New propulsion system, as well as an exhaust capture system that's made them the most fuel efficient cargo ship in the world. And they cut emissions by 37%, fuel consumption by 20%. That obviously saves them a lot of money. They've also been implementing blockchain to deal with the clearing of customs and administration side of the logistics business. It's saving the shipping business 10% in the cost of that people have to pay to ship their goods. So very innovative. They've recently announced that next year they're going to launch a ship that's going to run on e-methane. They've looked at and also plan to bring ships out on recycled cooking oil, and they likely are talking about green ammonia as also being a future where they see within the next couple decades a completely emission-free, I shouldn't say emission-free, a carbon-free shipping force to be able to market. So why are they doing this? Their customers are demanding it, and they're in many cases are willing to pay a little bit more for a greener transportation solution. Next. So the innovation is one side. Those companies tend to be doing things that cause their companies to grow. Looking at ESG factors also help mitigate risk. If you look at and think about some of the biggest disasters that we have seen in the last 10 years, Equifax released almost all of our credit information in a security leak that was quite obvious to anybody that looked at it. Bank of America even notified Equifax about a year before the major data leak that there was a flaw in their system. Unfortunately, they didn't do anything to fix it and released a lot of sensitive data. Volkswagen, very low ESG scores. So it wasn't a surprise, and you would have missed the drop in their stock when they ran into problems with their clean diesel, not actually working the way they said. And BP has had terrible safety history. Not surprising that they are involved with the major oil spill disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. Next slide. I really just want to touch on one thing here, and that's this is our investment process, where just about any type of values you have, you can marry a investment portfolio to reflect it. But beyond the investment process, I want to talk about the last step on there, which we call the delta, which is how you bring about change. Laura, the next slide, please. Shareholder advocacy is what we're talking about here. Again, if you are an owner of a company, if you own shares either because your employer has given you stock, or if you own mutual funds in your retirement plan, or if you own stock in an investment account, you have the right and the voice in how decisions are made at the company. How this typically gets done is through proxy voting, and shareholders, owners of the company, once a year, the companies typically have a big meeting in which items are voted on as far as who gets elected to the board, new policies that the company is going to take on. For example, are they going to report their ESG responsible numbers to the public? Are they going to look into whether women are paid a fair wage compared to men? All those things are items that come up at the annual meeting. And our clients have had several incidents of shareholder actions that have been taken to bring about positive change at the companies that they're already invested in. Apple oftentimes gets a gold star for their sustainable profile, but the truth is it wasn't until shareholders spoke up about cancer-causing chemicals in the iPhones that Steve Jobs actually made sustainability and environmental focus something that the company would make a strong point rather than a weak one. And we still see continual engagement with Apple on things such as privacy, and one very important to me, which is how to reduce the amount of time kids spend on their iPhone. But we've worked with UPS on more renewable fuel vehicles, Home Depot on removing pesticide products from their store shelves that are bad for bees, Starbucks relative to straw use, Smuckers on sustainable agriculture processes. And the way this gets done is by voting your proxy. If you are in a mutual fund, you don't see those proxies. The mutual fund will vote those for you. So one consideration I would encourage you is to look for companies and mutual fund companies that vote the proxies in a sustainable manner. If you own your own stock, you can take a look at and choose how to vote your proxies. What we encourage is typically hiring somebody to vote your proxies for you in a sustainable manner, which is something that we can help arrange for people. It is hard to know how your fund is voting their proxies, or even in many cases, what your fund owns, if it's something that you want to own or not. And I'd like to just point out for, certainly if you have an advisor, that's something that you can ask them to look into. But if you're doing your own investments, I would recommend a website. It's called asyousow.org. So again, asyousow, S-O-W, .org. And they, at that website, have all sorts of free tools that grade fund families on how they're voting their proxies. They also have an X-ray tool that goes in and tells you what they own in the portfolios. It's a very powerful website, and if you have any interest in it, I would certainly encourage you to take a look. Next slide. That was a quick run through of the things that I was hoping to talk about. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. I probably took a little more time than my wife allowed me, but she's used to that.
Hey, Bill, this is Jim. Like the entities like As You Sow, I know they, I think they show up at like stakeholder, shareholder meetings and that kind of thing. They might also be advocates in those companies to try and present and push environmental or green initiatives at a shareholder meeting. Is that right? Are they kind of play that role too?
That is true. Yes, they do. They're a nonprofit organization. Education is one of their primary goals, but they are also active shareholders. They actually have also taken a look at people who are trying to be leaders in the space and challenging them to do better. I know that there is a fund out there that's called a fossil fuel free fund that they looked at and challenged and made them change the name of the fund because they found that there was some fossil fuel exposure in the fund family. They've also challenged Vanguard and BlackRock, who have very publicly in the last couple of years said that they were interested in sustainable investing practices. And that's a big deal. I mean, they're the two of the biggest investment managers in the world. To start taking a look at this is great. However, they vote against virtually every ESG item that ever comes before a board meeting. So to have someone like As You Sow out there advocating for better decisions in this area really does encourage companies to be better. And that's important for good companies as well as companies that have a long way to go.
Bill, this is Sarah. Thank you so much. Your presentation was actually really informative, and it's nice to have something a little different. I have a quick question for you, and I don't know if it's kind of a loaded question. I don't know if you'd be able to answer, but typically when financial institutions look at the various ESG items, do they take a stance if it's carbon free, if nuclear is considered carbon free or not?
It's actually typically looked at separately. I know for when we look at a menu of investment options, fossil fuel free is one category, and nuclear is a separate category. So they do look at it separately.
And then renewables, I would assume, would be separate as well.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
We do think long term that nuclear is an important component to reducing the amount of carbon. And certainly, Europe, they are much bigger believers of it than we are here, or tend to be here, at least right now. And again, we think it's part of the solution.
Bill, this is Jeff Mengler. I have a question. I'm just wondering about your personal opinion, I guess, on the reliability of those ESG scores versus a little greenwashing that we hear about sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's a can of worms to get into. There is no question. There's no question that when you see the growth that was shown in one of those first charts and the number of investments that are considered green or ESG or sustainable, that they're not all living up to that mandate. Many cases, it's simply a fund company or switching the name on an existing fund to include that in the name. And that is why, a classic example, Vanguard has a tough time in this area, but the Vanguard rolled out a fund that they came to me about to try and get me to use. It's a sustainable investment fund. It's their ESG tool or their solution, and it receives a D or an F grade on 4 out of the 7 metrics on As You Sow. So that there's a perfect example of a company that is more about the marketing of the names sustainable or ESG than actually in the portfolio. So it is not as easy. It's why a tool like As You Sow, I would say that also Morningstar is a research company here in Chicago. They do a good job at looking into what the portfolios actually own and identifying whether it's actually living up to its name. Certainly, if it's been greenwashed, they're making a little bit of step in the right direction. But I think there's a lot more that you need to do if you want to be sure that you have it right. And there are so many companies that do just a fantastic job managing portfolios, identifying companies that are doing good, and then are active shareholders and encouraging these companies to be even better. That's where you want to be.
Thanks. Good answers.
Laura, can we get I see this has been recorded. I'd like to be able to see this again to digest it, plus, pass this on to a couple of people. Is it possible to get this presentation or?
Sure.
Okay. Should I email?
Sure,
you?
I would be happy to share this out with the meeting minutes.
Okay.
I can just attach it in the meeting minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess I did have the next slides where I think, I don't know, Bill, were you done with these?
Yep.
Okay. Gosh. Okay. So I'm sharing our future meeting dates. Please join us for the next Executive Council meeting in July 21st and October 20th. And our next Corporate Council meeting will be August 26th. So we'll all be hopefully having a great summer and be able to come back and report back out of all the great things that happened in that amount of time. Are there any announcements that people would like to make?
I'm sorry, Laura, could you repeat those dates, please?
Oh, sure. Here we go. I'm gonna go back to the slide. Oh, am I not sharing? I'm not sharing.
No.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's not coming up.
Okay. Had to close out of a screen. Here we go.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay. Here are our future dates. And I can include these in the meeting minutes that I send out. But look forward to seeing you all, hopefully at both of those, the Executive Council meeting and the Corporate Council. And And then I'll leave this up, and if there's any announcement, people should feel free to just jump in.
Hey, no.
Thanks everyone for joining, and continue to provide us feedback if there's other things you're looking for at the corporate council meetings. I guess, yeah, just like Laura said, we'll open it up to any comments or announcements or any feedback.
Oh, and with that, I would love if someone wanted to step forward and sign up to give the presentation at our next corporate council meeting on August 26th. Please, we love to have a diversity of information that's shared. So you can reach out to me directly. I'll put my email in the chat, or just raise your hand right now and we'll hold you to it.
Okay, well, I think the meeting is adjourned then. So we wish everybody a good rest of your day, and just let us know if you have any questions as we continue to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.